When you enroll your kids in organized sports, well, you know that the fees can be very high with registration charges and other costs on top of that. But sometimes the money goes missing from amateur sports leagues. It can range from a few $1,000s to millions. Joined now by Jamie Strachan of CBC Sports. Jamie, you've been investigating this. CBC Sports spearheaded the investigation, and what did you find out?
Well, John, we found, like you mentioned, hundreds of thousands of Canadian families, sign their children up for a variety of sports activities every year. The fees are very high. And, for the most part, and I want to stress, for the most part, these organizations are very well run by well-meaning volunteers. But we found that, over the last decade, around $8 million has been stolen from these organizations, usually by the person tasked to handle the money, the treasurer. The biggest one of those cases, the one that kind of attracted us to this story, is, just wrapping up its way through the courts here in Ontario, involving the Ontario Minor Hockey Association, where a paid employee, the director of finance, stole a whopping $2.5 million. Court records told us that money went to an online gambling and shopping addiction. That's before the courts right now. There was a guilty plea, and she's awaiting sentencing. John, these aren't sophisticated crimes, plotted, over years. They're usually involve, people writing checks to themselves. Eric Carosa is the founder of the Center for Fraud Prevention in Philadelphia, who really helped me a lot with this story. And he explains to me how these crimes usually take place.
Where there was one person in charge of it, that could have been a treasurer or a president serving as treasurer, and there wasn't anybody else involved in the process. Very little in the way of transparency. Typically, there was some high-level reporting, but not a lot of detail.
And John, we found that these took place, in virtually every province, amounts of money ranging, from a few $1,000s to, like I mentioned, that case here in Ontario where, more than $2 million was taken. And that's believed to be the most money ever taken from a youth sports franchise in North America.
So how are organizations reacting? And are they learning lessons from all of this, Jamie?
Well, to your first point, John, this is the famous tip of the iceberg scenario. These are the cases that we found that actually reached, a criminal or civil proceeding, the ones that were actually reported to police. Experts tell us that more often than not, these cases are never reported. First off, you have, organizations, the board, usually volunteers, rarely kind of paid individuals, are embarrassed this happened. Someone that they trusted, stole money from the organization, stole money that was intended for children's programs. And usually that person is, someone involved in the community. They have children that play in the league. There's someone, very well known, Joe, the treasurer, Pam, who everyone knows. And people are reluctant to blow up these people's lives. They know their kids, so they try to deal with it internally. So these were just the cases that we knew. When it comes to what they're doing about it, financial literacy in children's sports is just starting to get a little bit of traction, John. But we've seen organized youth sports, when they want to tackle something, they can. We've seen it with concussions. We've seen it slowly with sexual abuse in sport. We've seen it with parental behavior. And, the area of financial literacy, how organizations can better handle their money, ensure it's being handled safely and being used for its intended purposes, that's just something starting to gain traction, really what is a massive area of youth sports here in Canada and all across North America.
Thanks for this. CBC
Thanks,
Sports,
John. I appreciate it.
Jamie Strachan in Toronto.